Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ringsiders. My name is the man that genetics got Rin, and I'm joined as always by Hooch. And today we have Sam Adonis with us. How are you, Sam?
I am very good. Thank you guys for contacting me, and I'm looking forward to talking about some British wrestling and then what I've got going on coming up. What you guys are doing, it should be a good day.
Awesome. Yeah, we've wanted you on the show for a while actually. We've had um, Frank the Clown on before, who spoke very highly of you, um, and a few other independent names as well. Trevor being one of them, and yeah, we thought we need to get you on. So
Sure.
thank you for agreeing to come on. Like I said, we can talk some British wrestling, what's going on with you. If anything, I'd like to start with what's going on with you. Um, Obviously, I mean, if anyone follows you on social media, I'm sure they know you're a busy man. Just give us the brief intro to who you are if people aren't familiar with you.
Oof. So I would probably like to say the best wrestler you've never heard of. That kind of would be the way I'd put that. I've been traveling for the last 15 years. I had a developmental contract with WWE in 2012, and since then I've been on the go. I wrestled in the UK for All Star Wrestling for 4 years. I wrestled in CMLL for 2 years. I did 4 tours of All Japan. And now I'm currently with Lucha Libre AAA and MLW in the United States. So I've always taken a quite unconventional approach to my career and what I'm going to be. I grew up around the wrestling business, and I think there's a lot of there's norms that shouldn't be norms right now.
Mm,
I like the whole concept of being a journeyman wrestler and actually being able to prove your value and prove your worth, so you don't have to come into a WWE system as just another number.
hmm.
I like the days where if you have a chance to prove yourself and go out and actually sell some tickets and be a draw somewhere else. I think that's going to have some long term benefits to it, and that's pretty much been my long game all along, and that's where we are right now.
So, speaking about the work that you did with All Star Wrestling, I always like to mention this to people because if you're not from the UK, maybe you don't know how important All Star Wrestling is to the scene over here. It's where a lot of the work is really like cut the teeth, so to speak, in
Exactly.
wrestling. And even Brian Danielson, for example, when he did All Star, one of the things he took away from it was All Star Wrestling was where he really learned how to work a crowd. Because these are people who
Absolutely.
aren't wrestling fans, they're just at a holiday camp coming to see the wrestling for the night, and you've got to make them react. They're not just hardcore wrestling fans. Did you have a similar experience with that?
Oh, absolutely. I always tell everybody that All Stars where I learned that I honed my craft as well. It felt like the last wrestling territory when I was there.
Yeah,
The summers we would do literally anywhere between 6 to 10 shows a week in the summer, and you basically lived on the road. You
yeah,
had to wrestle every day. You'd have a show. Sometimes at noon, sometimes at 8 p.m. You'd have a bit of a road trip ahead of you, and you just live the rock and roll lifestyle like you hear in all these old shoot interviews and whatnot. We'd stay at a camp, hit the bar and then have to be on the road at 7 a.m. The rest of by 12, and maybe you had the day after that at the same camp. So it was my first experience as being like a full-time traveling wrestler. I had the contract with FCW before that, but that volume of matches, I'd never had it before, and it really teaches you kind of how to work smart instead of hard. You really do kind of lean into the fact that there's a crowd there that's it's almost pantomime.
yeah,
There's ways to instead of just showing off cool moves and doing stuff that's going to get some attention on the internet, your job is to entertain those 1,200 to 1,500 people in the room in front of you.
mm,
And from my personal experience, that has been absolutely invaluable for me. um, I think that's what I've been able to apply to my wrestling abilities everywhere in the world.
yeah,
I always kind of revert back to the simple all star wrestling mentality of just keep the people out, just get them involved. And I find now that so few wrestlers know that and do that, and it's
yeah.
almost like my main asset.
It it would almost be good if there was something in America. I know it's so big, you wouldn't be able to do All Star in America. It would have to be on a
The only
state by state basis.
it would only be able to be like maybe in Orlando or Florida, where have
Sure.
Disney and you have 4 different parks. I mean, it's possible, but it's just something that it was so invaluable to myself. And like you said, Daniel Bryan was there, Kevin Owens, El Generico, Sami
Yeah.
Zayn. I mean, you name it. These guys wrestled for All Star.
Yeah.
Chris Hero spent tons of time over there. You had the Colt Cabana. A lot of these guys, they kind of. I think everybody would tell you that's kind of their first experience as a full time pro wrestler. Because here in the States, with sheer volume, it's just impossible to wrestle every night of the week. There's
Yeah.
not that many shows, and in most of our even in the summer, you don't find too many Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night shows. The UK is so used to having it that way for the last 60 years. I think a lot of us Americans were able to just learn the craft and get better at it from our time in the UK.
Yeah, it's such a great way to get your reps in as a young wrestler. I think, like you said, having that regular match once a day, maybe 6 to 10 matches a week. And I think if like you send wrestlers on excursions from like America and Japan, I think it's almost like when you're a young wrestler in America, they think, oh, I'll go do All Star for a bit in the
Exactly. Well,
UK.
it's so funny you mentioned that because when I was there, Hiromu Takahashi, which is what's his name, and he's in New Japan.
Oh
Hiromu,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
he was
Rama.
there
Yeah,
with us.
still Rama Takahashi.
Yeah, he was with us for 6 weeks, living in the same house, traveling on the
right.
road. So, I
He's
mean,
crazy.
Japan. Jushin Liger did All Star in the early '90s. Tenzan, Kojima. So I mean, they look at it as an excursion. So
That's
we
so
don't.
cool, because
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think the fans realize at All Star. I remember when I went to Hull City Hall, just around the corner from here. We're only a small city, and the fans there they didn't have a clue who the wrestlers were. They'd just come to see the wrestling on a Saturday night, and they enjoyed it. But for me, I was watching it, and Brian Danielson comes out, and I was like,
Hmm.
what the hell,
Yeah.
Brian Danielson? And I was like telling him, mate,
Right.
Brian Danielson is like, I don't
I'm just
care.
imagining these shows and these cards in front of
It's
kid,
right.
like the fucking classics all these kids got, and we just like
Yeah. And he
we're
was
playing
wrestling
it.
James Mason as well, who's like a really good
Exactly.
technical wrestler. So it's a
It's
proper
funny to
treat.
me. I've been in that same position because our bill posters just have like a generic picture on it.
Yeah.
And then, you hear somebody came in for this company or somebody's stopping over for Germany. Next thing you know, you get to the show and it's, Sam Adonis and Gangrel against DJZ and Dean Allmark. And you're like, wait,
Yeah.
what the
Right.
hell? It almost has that, I don't know if you remember in Japan in the '90s, that war promotion where
Yeah.
the random ass tag teams. That's kind of how it had an all-star gig, and
Yeah.
it teaches you so much. And I mean, like I said, now it applies to everything I do. That control of the audience is something
Mm.
that is almost it's an asset that nobody has, and I definitely use it to my advantage.
I'm just
I,
imagining that because the work you do in AAA now. I was wondering what's the more intimidating crowd? A lot of kids at a camp, or like the Mexican crowd when you're the because I can see when you're saying about the camps. I can see that how you were working
yeah.
with the work you do in AAA. It makes so much sense. What's that like?
Sure, sure. Well, the thing is, I mean, it develops over time. So when I was a young wrestler, I used to like them. You evolve with your career, and this is 15 years in now, so I'm used to what AAA is. I'm used to being in a main event environment in front of 8 to 10,000 people. So it's funny because now personally, I get insecure at smaller events.
Right.
I'm very, very, I would say spoiled in a way because, we're doing such large volume. But, back in the day when I was 3 or 4 years into the business, going out in front of 300 holidaymakers was easy because it was, new and exciting to me. Now I think I, probably feel quite insecure walking out in front of 300 holidaymakers that don't know who I am. you
Yeah.
know, uh, AAA is such big business in Mexico, and most of my American bookings are, kind of they revolve around AAA. So it's just definitely more intimidating, smaller crowds now. And AAA is just one of those things. I think I've kind of passed the threshold. I'm almost like a household name now. It took
Mm.
5 or 6 years to get here, but I think I come with the show. I'm part of the show. They know Sam Adonis is part of Lucha Libre, which is really an honor in my opinion.
Oh,
I
a
love the
massive
Triple A, man.
honor. Yeah. Did you expect your career going that way? I'm sure you're happy you are, but is this how you expected it to go? Because, like you said, that's a high honor. A household name in lucha libre. That's pretty cool.
Sure. I didn't have any exact expectations, but I've always known that I was gonna travel the world and be a big time wrestler. I
Mm,
didn't expect to reach this level. I would love to say that. Oh, I knew I was going to be the big star, the main event guy. I never thought of that. I just needed to wrestle in Cork and Hall. I needed to wrestle in Arena Mexico. I needed these things. And as a kid, 10, 12 years old, trading tapes in the USA, that almost meant more to me than being the WWE champion at the time. So when I got signed to WWE, a big portion of me was missing because you get there and I see these guys and what they've done, and they're telling me stories of the things I've always wanted to do. So it kind of I was able to get out of there and you know refresh my career a bit and start over and get the international exposure. Um, and it's definitely not. It was never a plan, but it was never not a plan.
hmm
Mexico kind of happened by itself. And I think it is, like I said, it's an evolution or a natural progression. When I got to Mexico, I was already 4 years into All Star. So I was a more experienced performer. I knew how to work that audience. I knew how to get people wound up. And that being said, they're not used to having that. Most Americans, in Mexico are kind of on their own American style and whatever. I was very
hmm
diverse, and it was, whoa, this is different. We need that now. Let's
hmm
let's have that. And so I was probably given opportunities, not that I didn't deserve them, but not many people do get those opportunities just because my career has evolved in that direction.
Do you
Yeah.
feel like that? You were talking about like being the best unknown wrestler, like at the start. Did that put a chip on your shoulder? Because you were talking about like your
Mm.
all the stuff you're doing. Did that put a chip on your shoulder, or did you just focus on the road ahead and not just have the grudge?
Yes. So when I was in Mexico, when I first started in Mexico with CMLL, I definitely had a chip on my shoulder because I had a hard time. Like nobody wanted to relinquish their spot for the new American guy.
Mm.
So we had to go and CMLL is a lot like a professional sports team. You have to practice 3 days a week before your matches, and if you don't perform at your practice, then you're sitting out for the week.
Yeah.
So what a lot of people don't realize is like I had to put in the work lucha wise with the rolls and the jumping and the catching and the diving and the basing. I never did that on the shows because that's what the boss's orders were. They wanted me to be a punch kick American guy, but
hmm
I had to compete for my spot with everybody. And I did. I did have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I wanted to prove everybody that I'm here. I'm here to do this. I'm not just here to get famous or whatever. This is what I'm built for. So it ended up paying off in that way. I was able to get that attention, but at the end of the day, I'm still a little bit different than most. I kind of take. I've always been the kind of person to wrestle for the non-wrestling fans. I'm the kind of guy that wants to entertain everybody instead of just the segmented group that's gonna say how great you did online. I've always been much more of a performer, so in that case, I still feel like that nobody knows who any of us are on the
Yeah.
independents. Unless it's just like I still I hear it sometimes and talk to people, and some of these guys really think that there's something they're not. The independents, we're lucky to have it. It's almost
Yeah.
our training ground, and it's almost our college, if you will. But some big name independent star walks around Manhattan in front of 10 million people. Not one of them says hi.
Yeah.
That goes to show you the volume of what independent wrestling is in the United States, and how we all need to work a little harder. Just try to get that out there. Get people that wouldn't normally like wrestling to like wrestling to come to the shows. So I think that would probably be my main chip on my shoulder, trying to just keep create new viewership, get people that don't care to actually care.
Like I
Yeah,
think.
so it is very weird. Not even when I go out in the street, like when someone's asked me like, what are you like, what are your hobbies? And I'm like wrestling. They're like, oh, WWE, and it's always the first. It's not like AEW hasn't really broken that mold. Like I haven't been asked very much. Like it must feel it must feel very difficult. Well, I say social media has made that a lot easier with kind of
Mm.
Twitter, and I see like a lot of people do, and obviously TikTok gets its hate, but I think a lot of that stuff like brings a newer audience onto stuff with short clips because the attention spans. What do you feel about like social media's involvement in wrestling at the
Uh,
moment?
I think it could be used infinitely better than it's used. I think there's so many ways that it could, enhance so much of it. But I think in reality, a lot of it segments it, it divides it. And I think, you can, it's like making a playlist on your Spotify.
Yeah.
You can decide what songs you want to hear at any given time. And if you don't want to hear Madonna and you only want to hear heavy death metal, you become involved in that heavy death metal scene, and that's absorbing you, and it almost turns you off to you know, other genres, if you will. I think that's kind of happening in wrestling. If you like AEW and you only like AEW, chances are you're not watching any WWE. You're not following WWE wrestlers. You're following AEW guys.
Yeah.
And I even
Stan
think
culture, Stan culture.
in, independent wrestling as a whole as well. I think it's its own culture. There's a lot of people that love the indies that don't watch AEW or WWE or
Yeah.
Japanese. Indies are their stuff. So I think the social media in general. There's very few people that know what they like and just want to learn it all. I wish it were like that. I wish everybody just kind of could be on the same page of what good is. I almost feel like there's no metric for what makes somebody a good wrestler on the internet.
Hmm.
It's subjective and
There's
it's
no,
it's
right.
It's very
It's
subjective.
subjective,
subjective.
and everybody's trying to be the next big internet star, but there's no real rhyme or reason for any of it. So
Mm.
I think we could all kind of figure it out, and opening the doors a little bit more, watching all wrestling, because you can see stuff that might not be, it might not be a good match on Evolve, but it might be a main event in Mexico.
Yeah.
So you might want to, if you have the broad horizons, you understand what good is, because the guys that are consistent across the board are the good ones. Whereas there's certain guys that are a top guy in this independent and considered the next big deal, can't work a crowd to save their life.
Yeah.
They might not be able to have a street fight. They might, so I just wish the wrestling fans would be a little bit more broad. All I see is hatred for WWE and hatred for AEW. Everybody's just kind of caught in the middle, and everybody's picking one side or the other, and it shouldn't
Yeah.
be like that. If you truly love wrestling, just watch it all.
I completely agree with that. Completely agree. And it is like you said, one of the downfalls, the cons of social media is it's made the wrestling community very tribalistic. It's you have to like one or the other. You have to choose one, and if you don't, you're a sellout. And it's like, and if you have a certain opinion on like, oh, the WWE has to be bad, AEW has to be bad. It's like, no, I just watch what I can. There's barely enough time to watch anything outside of what I watch. I'm just going to watch what I can and enjoy it as much as I possibly can. And I might complain here and there, but that's how it works.
We need to get Elon on the case on. Need to get Elon on the case on that. Just get rid of.
Elon would not last a minute in wrestling Twitter. And I swear to God. But yeah, completely agree. Just watch what you can, enjoy what you can, because there's been so many times I've seen even the opposite, where something's been so hyped up, and they'll be sharing this GIF of a move, and it'll get shared 1,000 times, and then I'll watch it, and it's just a flip, and I'm like, it's cool, but like,
let's see the rest of the match.
But let's see the rest of the match, exactly. And that's what it's become, this like 3-second GIF culture of just sharing.
The attention spans are completely fucked.
Yeah, but if that's what you like, fair enough.
I always say that anybody can get clout, but not everyone can get respect. And that's something that, like I said, I do it the unconventional way. It's taken me longer to get it, but I'd like to say that I have a decent amount of respect amongst my peers.
Sure.
Because I never was the guy to, go wrestle for the discount rate and, take all these crazy bumps and do stupid shit just to get attention online. There's plenty of wrestlers, and I'm not going to name any names, but they could be, considered internet darlings, and they're still making decent money across the country. That the top level performers from the last 30 years would look at them as absolute jokes.
Hmm.
you know, and a lot of times people justify it by saying the business has changed. And that's fine. The business has changed. Don't get me wrong. But I, for one, want to be the guy that, that a Ric Flair would respect, that Terry Funk would respect, Ultimo Dragon would respect. You can have your cake and eat it too, and be able to use social media to your advantage, as well as kind of staying in the realm of pro wrestling and get the respect.
Yeah, this is speaking of the tribalism and touching on something you just said. Getting the respect of someone like a Ric Flair or a Tully Blanchard or something like that. That's what Jim Cornette always says. He always alludes to what would these wrestlers say about this. And
Exactly.
I personally am a Jim Cornette fan, and that's my opinion. I like Jim Cornette, and that's a lot of people have a go at me about it, but I don't agree with him on everything. I just like to listen to the guy. I think he's very interesting, and I
Right.
think he knows a lot about the industry. But he always mentions that as well. Like, what would these older guys say, like the Ric Flair and
Right.
stuff?
Right.
It's
Right.
like,
Right.
and is that something you agree with? Like you mentioned, it's
Oh, absolutely. I don't really listen to any podcasts anymore. Like I'm into horror fiction, believe it or not. That's my podcast of choice.
Oh,
But
no.
okay.
the
He
the
he's a big horror fan.
I am,
I'm
yeah.
yeah,
not.
that gets me from airport to airport. But like I've always, again, and this has to do with just coming from a wrestling family. I know you don't really get anything out of wrestling a legend. All
Mm,
you can get is maybe a little respect from them. And if you when you're 19, 20 years old and you get to wrestle Hacksaw Jim Duggan like I did when I was 18, and oh my gosh, it's not going to get you a job in WWE tomorrow. It's not going to be your next big thing, your big break. There's literally nothing that can happen from any of this stuff. Best case scenario, you get some respect out of it.
yeah.
But if you do it long enough, you come across people that now across the board, everybody knows that guy can go.
Mm,
So that's something that I've always looked at, and not just myself. I think other wrestlers should look at it like that. Ultimo Dragon would be my biggest, the one that blew my mind as far as being able to earn somebody's respect that means so much to me. Um, you
Rey
know,
Mysterio's
all,
another.
yeah, well, just being around these guys, being with them to spend time with them, and to know that I definitely, it freaks me out when I'm with these guys. I'm still like, oh my God, that's my childhood hero.
yeah.
But, Ultimo Dragon was the first guy to invite me to Japan. He brought me to Japan to be his heel, and that was just one of those things. It's kind of funny to me because I think there's a lot of wrestlers that are just so caught up with the modern, internet style and whatnot. There's going to be people saying, why does Sam Adonis get booked? He doesn't do anything cool.
Hmm.
Why is he all over the place? And a lot of the times that is because the people up top, the people that know what we're looking for, have heard my reputation or have been able to see me do what I do. So I think you always have to just you kind of have to be a chameleon. You have to go, work for every audience and make everybody happy in every way. I, for one, just see how many audiences there are other than just the online internet market.
Yeah.
There's different. There's Japan, there's Mexico, there's each state. There's so many ways to go out there and learn an audience that you just kind of have to appeal to the masses. And as long as if you respect wrestling, it will respect you. And that's kind of the way I look at it.
And speaking of respect, I mean, you've wrestled a who's who of wrestling in present day. I mean, when it comes to wrestling like a Jay White, for example, or the legends in Mexico, Ultimo Dragon, it's you've wrestled just about you name somebody and you've probably had a match against them, and that's what I love about you is
Pentagon.
you've really got a wide range of who you can work with, and that's what a promoter wants. They know that they can put you in the ring with anybody and you can put on a good match, and that seems like
Well,
what you can do.
well, that's kind of like my biggest asset. And I've prided myself on that forever. And I got two quick stories about how it pays off. I was the All Star Wrestling champion for a while, and the way
Hmm.
those All Star would run their shows, we'd have about 10 or 12 wrestlers, and then usually there'd be a car coming from locally with four wrestlers. And a lot of these guys had worked for All Star before, but every once in a while they'd throw a student into the car, and it was like one of his second or third matches.
Mm-hmm.
As the champion, when Brian would see a student that he didn't see anything in and he just had to find something for them to do, he'd put them with me. And this kid would be 3 matches in, and we're doing a heavyweight title match for 15 minutes because he knows that I'm self-contained. I can do that what I do without anyone else.
Yeah.
And that's that's always been a huge compliment, to be able to be trusted with that, on a consistent basis. Literally, the closest you can get in there with a broomstick as possible is, a guy that's had 2 or 3 matches. And another thing was in Warrior Wrestling in Chicago.
Yeah.
They ended up helping me. I was on their first show, and I was able to barter a lot of their Mexican talent. And just because Steve and Eric are two of the greatest guys in wrestling, they kind of threw me a bone every show. It's like, hey, we got to use Sam. He's helping out. He's part of this. So they just kept using me and kept using me, and I was the utility player. I was the
Mm-hmm.
guy that would do any match. I could do hardcore against LA Park. I could do a 6-man lucha tag with Daga and Dragon Lee. I could do, a falls count anywhere. I could do Michael Elgin or whoever you wanted. And it got to the point where after 3.5, 4 years, it kind of like clicked in everyone's brain, like, oh, this is the guy.
Mm-hmm.
The fans turned me babyface. It wasn't a decision of myself. I never just said, oh, I'm babyface in Chicago. Now the people there just kind of grasped to that because it was being able to do anything you're asked. And that being said, in my opinion, that's one of the keys, the biggest keys to getting over. If you can do everything, you can thrive at whatever. I
Yeah.
still see so many wrestlers, even my ex, the guys I worked with, you hear people complaining about how the system did them dirty and how they didn't have a fair chance. And it wasn't, and in my opinion, and this is coming from an ex-WWE, ex-WWE developmental star, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's absolute bullshit. You have to, you need to get better. You need to look at all your opportunities. And if they gave you some shitty opportunity that you had to get over with, if you were that in tune with what we do and as a performer and could do everything, you would get over in that job.
Mm-hmm.
And getting over doesn't mean making that character they gave you the biggest star in the company. You just might be so good at that job that your producer or your wrestler or your boss says, you know what, this guy's too good for this. Let's move him around.
Yeah.
And this comes with that respect. When you get that respect, it's kind of, people don't expect the same thing from you that they expect from others.
Perfect example would be Chad Gable, for example, in WWE. Someone who was given a few, pretty shitty gimmicks, but he made the most of it every time. And I think in the end, he just went, we respect that guy now. Let's give him something serious. And that's what he's doing now.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. And I think just being able, I think it's like, I always use the terminology that if I'm a heart surgeon, or if I'm getting heart surgery, I still want my heart doctor to know the anatomy of my foot.
Yeah.
Just peace of mind,
Yeah,
as a doctor, if you're high level of anything, you can't just forget everything that doesn't apply to you. If you want to be the best wrestler, well, Daniel Bryan's an example. CM Punk's one of the examples too. Dean Ambrose, these guys, Jericho. To be the best in our field, you have to know every audience in every city, every country, every state of mind, and you have to apply it. To just go out and do what you do and say, well, I don't do that, so I don't need to do that or don't need to learn that. That's just kind of biting off your nose to spite your face. And that's what I think a lot of, guys that never get to the next level, they end up missing. I think main event wrestling really is, it is the mismatch of style. It is just kind of everything rolled into once with some drama and entertainment. And if you really want to get to that level, you need to just perfect every step you take along the way. And in my opinion, like I said, I'm February 2nd will be the beginning of my 16th year in wrestling.
Wow.
And I still think like, I would see myself as a very, promising up and comer.
Mm-hmm.
And the way wrestling is designed now, there's so many companies, so many schools, everything. most guys have a 3 or 4 year wrestling career because they don't truly love this. They just want to get the fame. They want the Instagram followings. I'm 15 years in, and I just now feel pretty good about being able to, have a bright future, to know what's going to happen, and be in a high profile instead of just showing up in NXT, having a chance to show off my workout abilities and, then get a bum opportunity. I think sometimes it takes a lot longer, but the more difficult the journey, the greater reward.
Absolutely. And before Zoom does cut us off, this 45 minutes has flown by. We don't have Zoom Premium at the moment, so we're limited to 45 minutes. However, because I've really enjoyed speaking to you, I mean, it would be absolutely amazing to get you back on at some point. I know we said we want to talk about British wrestling and your future and stuff. I feel like we've spoken a lot about Mexican wrestling, British wrestling. It'd be great to get you on and talk some more with you in the future if you'd be up for it. I think there's a lot more we can talk about for sure.
We'd love to chat about your photo shoot with George Napolitano.
Absolutely, yeah. There was so much more to talk about.
Yeah, we've had him on as a guest.
I've honestly, I'm surprised it took me 16 years to meet him, just because he's one of those guys.
What a legend!
I met Bill Apter probably 10 years ago, and now George was there, and just I love that stuff. Like I said, if you're a doctor, you need to know as much about anatomy as you can. And guys like George Napolitano, even though
know everything,
they're not in the ring, but they've seen more shit, than most of the guys that are in the ring right now.
We're speaking to George on Thursday, and he's always one of the most interesting chats. We've got George coming on with Carrie Silkin, and we just thought putting those two in the same interview would be one of the most interesting things we can do.
You will not be saying a word, Callum. You will not be saying a word.
That's kind of the same thing, that's coming down to respect overall. You can't bullshit respect. You can't fake passion. Especially around guys that have been around this business 40 or 50 years. And I can't tell you how much it's helped me personally, being able to just, recite dates and recite matches and angles and storylines that a guy like George Napolitano or Kerry Silkin would say, hold up, why does this 32-year-old know this?
Sure.
It kind of freaks them out. That happened with me and Robbie Brookside in the UK. That happened with me in Atlantis and Negro Casas in Mexico, Ultima Dragon. The same thing is when you're hitting them with the deep cuts and actually give a damn, they automatically look at you differently. And then next thing you know, they respect you not for your ability, but for your passion.
For your passion.
And that eventually,
you can't